I also teach a signature course, or as you might call them, a UGS 303 course called Black Austin Matters. That was in the fall, so this is the only time I get to be in front of students this semester, so it's good to see you. So tonight we come together to explore the knowledge and expertise related to difficult conversations and the importance of discourse that our faculty bring to the 40 acres. Our lecture series will pose and consider questions that we hope will benefit us all at the various points of life where we currently find ourselves. It is our hope that you will find points of connection to reflect on as your UT time unfolds. Before I introduce our speaker for the evening, some quick housekeeping. Hopefully you've scanned the QR code that will sort of pop up as it goes in the slides behind you. We would love for you to send questions you have during the lecture to the QR code that's there. So it's okay to have your phone out to ask a question. Once our speaker is finished, we'll ask you to stay seated for about 5 to 10 minutes for a question and answer period that will conclude the evening. Please do not get up until we have finished the Q&A section. And so, our speaker tonight is Dr. Sean Upshaw. He is currently an assistant professor in the Stan Richards School of Advertising and Public Relations in the Moody College of Communication. His research focuses on health disparity and communication in the context of visual information and persuasion. Dr. Upshaw's signature course is called Health, Communication, Culture, and Disparity, and tonight we will be his students. Again, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this event. At this time, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Sean Upshaw.
How y'all doing? Good? Good. Before we begin, I just want to let you know I'm more of an interactive person or interactive professor, so if I interact with you, just feel free to talk back to me. It kind of keeps the conversation going, and knowing that I realize that many of you have already went through hours of lecture today, so I promise you this will not be one of those circumstances, so it's going to be more of an interactive dialogue. Is that okay? Yes. All right. The purpose of being trauma, right? So, our conversation for this evening is screens to face-to-face, how digital media shapes in-person social interactions through uses and gratification theory. And so, during our time together, we're going to talk about the digital dilemma, followed by understanding uses and gratification theory in contemporary context, digital media impact on face-to-face social behavior, a case study, the smartphone dependency dilemma, the Phubbing Phenomenon, meaning phone and snubbing for those who may be familiar with it, digital media's effect on social skills development, and they will wrap up with strategies for balancing digital and in-person interactions. So when we speak about the digital dilemma, as many of us can attest to, that modern society is deeply integrated or ingrained with smartphones and digital media. A recent NPR article titled "A Break from Your Smartphone Can Reboot Your Mood" highlights the effects of smartphone dependency and the rise of digital detox as a solution. Many of my students who are currently taking my signature course have already been exposed to this conversation, so do not give it away. However, the one thing I encourage my students to think about is that when you're reviewing an article or a story, think about what does the article not talk about. This gives us an avenue to unpack, explore, examine, and in some cases have a meaningful dialogue. And so in the case of this article, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the missing perspective that is not discussed is, why do people turn to digital media in the first place? So why do you think you turn to digital media? Something to think about. And so to explain this in a contemporary context using a theoretical or explanatory framework, I provide uses and gratification theory. And basically, it provides a framework or perspective for understanding why we consume media and how it shapes our interactions with others and ourselves. Exactly, digital media in action, right? So instead of asking simply, how can we use our phones less, according to the article, what we should ask is, what are we getting from digital media and how can we balance it with in-person interactions or connections? So again, what I teach my students is I do not teach you what to think, but how to think about it. This is perspective. So your voice is definitely included, not only in the dialogue, but also the interpretation that you walk away with. So let's break down a little bit from a surface level. What is uses and gratification theory in contemporary context? It explains that people actively choose media to fulfill specific needs, just like picking food at a buffet or at a restaurant. By a show of hands, how many of you often go to Google reviews or your peer reviews to get food recommendations before you go out on a Saturday or Friday night? Okay. Can I just get one person to tell me why they would go along with that option? Okay, I got two, so I'll start with you.
Because that people that have a similar experience.
So it definitely sounds like a connection and validation on that point. Very good. And we're back.
I think I was going to say something else, so you know it's good, you know we can get.
Connection and validation. Very good. We're going to talk about that a little bit more further. So in a variety of research and literature identifies signature areas of this particular framework and digital media influence in the areas of health, education, and economics and more. So this is not just solely relating to social or personal behavior, but it has other branches that has had its presence in. And then speaking of presence, it's not only a theoretical framework that's rooted in media effects research, but it's also connected to other academic disciplines such as sociology and psychology. I'm going to kind of expand on why that's the case. So to kind of give you a little bit of an overview here, as you can see, there are 5 particular areas that this particular theory explains when it comes to interactions and the way we engage with media. First, there's cognitive, where we go to media to learn and get information. How many of you often get your news or information from some form of a social media platform, whether it's Google or NPR? Okay, very good. Okay. When it comes to affective, what is dealing with emotions and entertainment, how many of you often use your smartphone or digital media to get any form of entertainment or some form of exposure or escape? Very good. So when it comes to personal and integrative, identity and confidence, we often use social media to not only share or express ideas, but we typically look for validation from other people. And along with that, the social integrative, sorry, I'm tongue-tied here today, say that we often not only look for validation and confidence, but we also try to stay connected with one another. How many of you have friends that are long distance at other schools that you stay connected with? Very good. So this is starting to resonate with many of you. Through texting, social media, and video calls, and the list goes on. And then finally, tension release. We need something to express our innermost thoughts or expressions to our peers, those that are followers of our work or enthusiasts of our work. And also, it's a form of escape or relaxation. So media does play a role. How many of you often use media to meditate, or to reflect, or listen to calm music? This is an example I'm referring to. So, let's look at digital media's impact on face-to-face social behavior. This particular theory explains how social smartphones or social media dependency is formulated. People don't just mindlessly scroll, they actively seek connection, validation, or escape. So if you ever find yourself scrolling, ask yourself, are we looking to connect? Are we looking for validation, or are we looking to escape? So let's say that again. Connection, validation, escape. Say that for me, please. Connection, validation, escape. So the next time you find your friends asking, hey, I'm just scrolling, just remember, those 3 are gonna come to mind. Without an alternative ways to meet the needs, digital habits remain unchanged despite digital detox efforts. So how many of you have actually done or performed or thought about doing a digital detox at some point? Okay, keep that, okay? But also we're going to talk about a balance that will help you be able to not only participate, but not also at the same time remove yourself completely from the connection process. And continuing on, We're going to talk about shifting social norms here. Online first communication, when it comes to social norms, conversations that happen face-to-face now often occur through text and other social media communications. How many of you often know someone that only texts using abbreviated or emoji terms? No shame, I know a few people that are around my age, so yeah, we do that too. How many of you know someone that doesn't like receiving phone calls but rather text you completely? Absolutely. You're setting your communication practices, by the way, so people find themselves getting annoyed, just telling them, I'm teaching you how to communicate with me, so don't get upset with me. But that's how it typically works. The rise of parasocial relationships, where people from one-sided emotional bonds with other online figures instead of real-life connections closest to us. How many of you know someone that you follow in terms of an influencer? Okay. Do you actually know these individual people very personally, or only what they share with you? Only what they share with you, right? It's very packaged. So when it comes to your real-life connections, do you have individuals within your own social circles that you typically rely on or interact with? Okay. Since being here at UT, I know many of you probably found bonding with other students in terms of classes, hobbies, things of that nature. So this is kind of resonating with first in-person interaction versus online, where it's just you and the content creator or the influencer. So let's talk about the smartphone dependency case here. So I have a brief clip here. It's an audio, so hopefully you can hear it. Let's try it.
Find out what would happen to people's moods and attention spans if they turned off their smartphones. NPR's Allison Aubrey tells us how long it took to make a difference.
At a time when more than 90% of Americans have a smartphone, we tend to forget that having a supercomputer at our fingertips all the time is a new phenomenon. Adrian Ward is a psychologist at the University of Texas at Austin. He's in his late 30s, and he remembers having a dial-up connection.
When I was a boy, the internet, we didn't have it at first, but then it lived in a room in our house. And you used it at a specific time because you had limited minutes and you had to make sure nobody else was on the phone line.
So what would it feel like to go back to those days when we didn't have constant connection to everything? He and his collaborators decided to find out. They recruited 467 participants who agreed to block the internet from their smartphones for 2 weeks. That means no social media scrolling, no streaming, no online shopping on their phones. Turns out most people, 91% of the participants, seemed to feel better.
What we found was that people had better mental health, better subjective well-being, and better sustained attention.
For example, when participants were asked to perform a task to measure how long they could pay attention, they did better. And when it came to questions such as how often in the past week you felt little interest or pleasure in doing things, their responses pointed to a significant lift in mood. Ward says study results suggest a reduction in symptoms of depression on par with what other studies have found with antidepressant medications.
Not saying it's the same as depressant, who knows how long-lasting this effect is, but that suggests it's something worth looking into.
His hypothesis on what actually improves moods isn't about what was taken away from people. After all, they can still use computers at work or home, and they can talk on their phones. It has more to do with what they added back into their lives.
So it's not that you stop using the internet and magically you just feel better. It's that you do other things. And so people reported that they spend more time in nature, more time socializing, more time doing hobbies. They got more sleep.
They felt more socially connected. Dr. Judith Joseph is a psychiatrist and leads a Women in Medicine initiative at Columbia University. She says she's not surprised by the findings. Many people don't want to be tethered to their devices.
They know their phones are a problem. They just can't stop. So helping people to retrain their brains to derive joy from healthy places has an antidepressant effect. And that's why I'm not surprised.
A lot of the participants in the study found that they had to break the rules. For example, when they were in their cars and needed to use a map app for directions, or log on to a Zoom meeting for work. It's a reminder of how dependent we've become. So even if you can't turn off the internet, Dr. Joseph recommends taking little breaks, beginning with baby steps.
Slowly over time, if you can do this, even for 30 minutes here, 20 minutes here, build up. Try to see if you can increase these increments on a weekly basis.
Or here's one idea to get started. If you go out for a walk after dinner, leave your smartphone behind and see how you feel. Alice Mulberry, NPR News.
Shout out to Dr. Ward for that extraordinary study. And of course, the story really paints the picture about our dependency. Now, I don't want you to walk away saying I have dependency on the phone, but what we're talking about is having a healthy co-balance between what we engage with and how we remove ourselves when it's necessary. How many of you are introverts in the room? So we know when our social batteries are low, we have to go and hide and escape and recharge. For my extroverts in the room, I know the crowd is the life of the party, but also realizing you're your own company. And with the dependency question, I just want to highlight a few things from the article. First, the impact of constant connectivity on mental health and well-being and productivity really dampens or showcases how long, or in some cases, how much are we exposed to technology and what does that do to our own individual growth. The benefits of digital detox, mainly dealing with intentional breaks from the screens to improve focus and social engagement. But what the article doesn't talk about is how to actually have reduction in screen time temporarily, but it doesn't address the roots of it, particularly with smartphone dependency. I am included in that category. So when it comes to the theoretical framework, it provides a missing perspective. People need to find alternative ways to fulfill their digital cravings online. So think of it as something we often refer to when it comes to meal consumption. If we practice our meal consumptions more efficiently, we tend to have a healthy relationship to food. But when we overindulge or overconsume, it becomes a little poison or harm. So what way to check ourselves is to know what we can handle, how long we can handle, and when to break away when necessary. Which brings us to the concept of, it's called snubbing, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but it's basically phone and snubbing. So the definition really involves ignoring someone in favor of a smartphone. How many of you have known or have done that at some point in your life? Thank you for being honest. I really appreciate it because I too have done that too, so it's a good thing. So why does this happen? From the theoretical perspective, we seek social validation. Number two, it's a form of escape from an awkward situation. How many of you have actually been in places where awkward situations occur and you find yourself looking at your smartphone to pretend you don't want to be bothered? This typically happens in very public, crowded places where something odd just happens and you have that blank stare. Let me look at my phone so I don't have no time to talk to this person. Yeah, we've all seen it. From online activity to road rage, whatever you can think of, it typically happens. So what does this mean about our impact on relationships? When it comes to this particular phenomenon decreases trust and intimacy when it comes to face-to-face interaction. It also can lead to emotional disconnect despite being connected online. Ain't that something? You can be disconnected but still be connected online. That's a lot to think about there. So the findings from the study really helps us understand that increasing smartphone use correlates with lower relationship satisfaction. Now, again, this is just one incident that doesn't represent the entire human experience, but just one note of it, as this phenomenon speaks about. See, we're almost done, not that far away. So the downside of digital communication, I just want to mention this very quickly, that when it comes to the reduction of nonverbal communication skills, eye, body, contact, language, tone of voice, these are social cues we typically pick up on a person's mood, behavior, or feeling of expression before going into deeper levels of conversation. A lack of deep conversation and social skills due to short form of digital interaction. How many of you know someone that may have an attention span of 5 to 7 minutes before you lose them? Some would say it's connected to our devices and it sort of programs how much we consume and engage with media. Particularly with platforms that have time or time recommendations, whether it is 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. So what it does, it sets our limit on how much we consume, engage, before we lose the contact of the audience. So when it comes to the turbo research, I just want to point out that technology has limited people's ability to engage in meaningful conversations according to this person's work. Face-to-face dialogue requires presence, listening, and patient-centered skills that are often underdeveloped in the digital world first. So in other words, the small things you do with each other in terms of interacting, conversation, validation, and connection, they're just as powerful as your behaviors online. Because people typically remember how you made them feel during the moment of a conversation before departure, so always keep that in mind. So, how can we strengthen our social connections? Not all digital media is harmful. Disclaimer, it is not all harmful. It's our approach and how we engage is what determines whether to consider a good, a balance, or harm. Maintaining long-distance relationships, for an example. How many of you are FaceTime fanatics? Especially if you're distant and long away and your parents know how to use it. Oh my gosh, the stories I hear. Helping introverts for myself, and including myself, engage socially in comfortable digital spaces. When we don't have the words or don't have the energy to speak, sometimes just being present and others know what we're thinking about is one way we'll be able to build that community. And speaking of community, building that through shared interests and online activism, whether it's through a social club, a fraternity, or sorority, an academic cohort group, you build relationships not only in person, but you continue that relationship online. How many of you have LinkedIn accounts? That's an example. You're building relationships through interaction in prior history, whether it is work, internship, volunteer, or simply taking a class together. So the key takeaway here is to not eliminate digital media, but find a healthy balance between digital and in-person interaction. Let me say it again. It cannot be eliminated, but you can be able to find a healthy balance between the digital space and in-person interaction. And that's for you, the author, to figure out what that balance is and be able to express it and as well as enforce it amongst those who have a prior relationship with you. In other words, you're teaching people how to interact with you. So, in speaking of balance and interaction, instead of detoxing, people should just identify what they're seeking from digital media and find ways to meet those needs offline. What were the needs were? Validation, connection, escape. Think about that. If you use social media for connection, plan a time to meet in person with friends that are near you. If you binge watch to escape, like myself, we try to provide hobbies that involves relaxation without actually having to go through that. So in other words, if you do one thing, counterbalance it with another to have a sense of stability. If you use online communications for validation, also seek real-world spaces where you'll feel seen and validated. That is very important. You can get validation online, but make sure you have that same experience in person with peers, friends, family, those who know you at your best and at your core. And finally, schedule a phone-free time where using screen time to track apps for self-awareness, visiting cafes, libraries, museums, parks, for natural engagement conversations. So I'm a fan of people watching sometimes. If I just need to escape, I typically just see what else everybody else is doing, but I'll actually have to be in their faces to find out. So that typically happens. You have the Blanton Museum. You also have a lot of cafes around campus. Parks, for those who are going to them, I have a few students that are planning to go themselves during spring break. So the idea is you got options. So it's for you to plan that and share them with others who are closest to you. So what are some takeaways here? I told you I want to be no long lecture. I promise you I'm not going to get past. So the NPR article really highlights insights into smartphone addiction and the digital detox benefits. And you can find that story on NPR for those that are interested. The theoretical framework explains why people use media to fulfill cognitive, emotional, and social needs. Rather than just cutting the screen time, we should focus on fulfilling these needs in balanced ways, both digitally and as well as in person. And finally, instead of asking, how can we stop using our phones, let's ask, how can we create a world where offline interactions are just as fulfilling as the digital one. So in other words, it's got to be a balance between what you are trying to improve upon and the way you can reward yourself to keeping that relationship going. These are my references, and of course, I want to thank you for taking your time and your attention to listen to me, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue. So thank you so much.
Much better idea to use the microphone by hand. So, stay tuned for our Q&A. We've got 2 questions, I think, to ask you. So, first of all, thank you, Dr. Upshaw. That was a fantastic lecture. The first question is, how do you suggest navigating balancing digital media and human connection in an academic space that often relies on digital media?
You're trying to make me tell on my peers. So, to be honest with you, that expectation really falls upon you. There's really no set standard on what you think or what we would think would be appropriate. This is where you, as the young adults, can determine what that balance is, whether it is for in-person or later or a combination of both, but that's really for you to define what that balance is. All we ask is that you be able to respect those boundaries that you set on yourself and be able to meet those expectations that we ask in terms of course engagement and content, but really that decision really relies upon you. So in other words, I don't have that answer, but I know you will get that answer soon when you figure out what that balance is.
Good answer. Okay, this is kind of a fun question. Have any of your students told you that they have changed their digital media habits after having discussed this in your classes? If so, what were the reflections?
Okay, I have not had that conversation yet, but I guarantee you the ones that are in the room, I can see that happening when we come back from spring break. But from prior chances of teaching this course, I've had students to tell me that they have either reduced their time online or have found other fulfilling ways that they can stay connected with their peers and colleagues that doesn't involve a digital medium. And in some cases, they even found more time to put their phones aside. Not to say you don't abandon it, but they still remain connected to it in terms of communication. But interactions, they found other validating ways to pull it off. So to answer your question, both yes and something forthcoming within the weeks after we come back from spring break.
That's fantastic. Once again, give a big hand to Dr. Shaw. And if you have signed up for Beyond Debate, the small group discussions, please make your way to the right side of the room for pizza and group assignments. For everybody else, thank you for attending this evening. Please exit through the doors near the windows. Have a safe and happy spring break.